After he had gathered Jeff, Lewis and Peroni together before meeting Larry for the first time. Father Nichols had made a point of telling them in no uncertain terms what horrors could await them if they stayed and helped him protect the old crook. Then he had asked them all one simple question. Why? At some point, he had said, you must all ask yourself the same question. Why am I here? Why am I willing to die for someone who has no faith, someone who quite clearly does not deserve our help, or care if we must make that ultimate sacrifice and die for him? I could give you many reasons, but in the end, the decision must be yours and yours alone. You must each take time over the coming hours and look to yourselves for the answer. And if you cannot find a reason, there is no shame in you leaving now. This assignment is strictly for willing volunteers only. No one who remains, least of all me, will judge you harshly for this, and you can go in the knowledge we don't hold you in any less regard than when this all started. Jeff paused on the stairs and looked back up to Larry's room. He had gone to see Larry in the hope of finding an answer to that question which was weighing so heavily on his young shoulders. To find some spark of humanity in the man that would make all this worthwhile. So that if he had to indeed make that ultimate sacrifice and stand between Larry McCulloch and the darkness, knowing it would be his end, he would do so without hesitation, safe in the knowledge it was a worthwhile act. But Larry just made it so damn hard. Jeff knew Lewis hated the man, but still had decided to stay, not for the guns and glory as Larry had said, but because for all his wisecracks, Lewis believed in humanity no matter what it looked or sounded like above everything else. Even a scoundrel like Larry McCulloch deserved to be saved. You don't have to like a man to pull him out of the way of an oncoming juggernaut, as Lewis had told Jeff once. But Jeff needed to see more of the man Larry was, to see past that brash exterior to the real, vulnerable person underneath. Because he had to believe there was one. Larry was coming to the end of a very dark road. Sure, it was one he had paved himself with the misery of others, and the old crook certainly was a prime candidate to sow what he had reaped. But why? Jeff asked himself. He took a step back up before he realized it. Should he really try to get through to the man again? He paused before going higher. Perhaps the whiskey had been a bad idea, but even so Jeff was sure he had seen something. Well, for want of a better word, human behind Larry's eyes when they spoke, before he put the shutters down again. Just a hint maybe, but it was definitely there. He was about to make his way back upstairs when raised voices coming from downstairs halted him. Idiots. It was Peroni. She came storming out of the living room and into the kitchen. Jeff could hear Father Nichols, who was still in the living room, almost shouting at someone, and judging by the one-way conversation he was on the phone, no doubt to the Vatican again, and it was clear from the tone and volume of his usually gentle voice it wasn't a conversation he was relishing or, by the sounds of it, winning. Jeff sat on the stairs, like a child hearing his parents fighting downstairs, and listened. We can't wait a week, Cardinal, in a week we could all be dead. It took Jeff a moment to realize Father Nichols was speaking English, which meant he must be speaking too, although Nichols would never actually say the word, his nemesis at the Vatican, Cardinal Vaughan. A man who had little time for the work of Nichols and his team based deep in the bowels of the old city. But much to Nichols' chagrin, Vaughan was his immediate superior, and as such Nichols had to deal with the man, and his cynicism on a regular basis. Politics, Lewis had lamented on more than one occasion. It's all politics, Jeff mate, better you and me keep out of the way and let the grown-ups battle it out. Wait, did Nichols just say they could all be dead in a week? You are messing with people's lives here, Cardinal, Nichols said. Please, let me speak to His Holiness. Jeff exhaled, impressed. He knew that Nichols was high up in the pecking order at the Vatican, albeit unofficially, but he didn't realize the man had the ear of the Pope himself. No, Vaughan, I know His Holiness is back. He came back yesterday, Nichols said sharply. Then added softer, John, please. I know we don't see eye to eye on this, but you have to trust me. Get me that clearance or all of this will be for nothing. We have a great chance here, John, don't let it get buried under all this paperwork. If Randall finds Larry. His voice trailed off. Clearance. That meant only one thing. Nichols was trying to get Larry into the Vatican where no one, especially a collector like Randall, could touch him, and that sounded good to Jeff. John? Damn it. Nichols appeared in the doorway to the living room looking flustered and, unless Jeff was mistaken, close to tears. He snapped the mobile phone shut in his hand and rested himself against the frame and let out a long breath. Cardinal Vaughan had obviously hung up. Which meant no clearance, so it looked like at least another week here before they could get to safety. God, Larry would love that. Nichols was definitely close to tears. He rubbed his eyes with the balls of his hands. He looked up as Peroni came out of the kitchen, her face still red with fury. She shrugged as if to say, well? Nichols just weary shook his head in response, and Peroni said something sharply in Italian which had to be an obscenity judging by the venom in her voice. Of all the things Jeff had seen and heard over the last couple of days, this was perhaps the most disturbing. Two of the strongest people he had ever met so disillusioned, they almost looked defeated before the battle had even begun, hardly the best way to face such an unknown enemy. Jeff watched them both, so deflated. After a moment they hugged and Nichols said something softly to Peroni in Italian which Jeff did not understand. "I know," Peroni replied in English, "but we cannot give in, Father." "I suppose," Nichols said sounding less than sure, "but we don't have a choice, do we?" "Like you said, we can always walk away," Peroni said. "That's not an option I'm willing to take," Nichols said with a shake of the head. It was only now Jeff realized he had been holding his breath. He suddenly felt like a trespasser in this most personal of moments between the two. Finally they both went back inside the living room and Jeff could breathe again. It seemed to Jeff even their so-called own side was against them in this. "So Jeffrey," he asked himself. "Why?" And much to his surprise the answer came quickly. There were two very good reasons right there in that room, and another very sarcastic one freezing his balls off outside keeping watch. Good people, despite everything, willing to press on no matter what the cost to help a lost soul like Larry McCulloch. Did he deserve their help? God no, and he certainly wouldn't thank them for it. But Jeff didn't care. This wasn't about McCulloch or the Vatican bureaucrats, or even in the end about the fight against evil. This was about the men, and woman, next to you. Father Nichols, Peroni, and Lewis, they were why he was still here and why he would stay to the bitter end. The revelation felt good and with it the weight lifted from his shoulders. Jeff got to his feet and rubbed the life back into his numb legs. It was time to relieve Lewis outside, a job he usually hated but not tonight. So what if they had to wait a few more days for those pencil pushers in the Vatican to clear their precious paperwork and get them out of here? He could happily hold on now that the path ahead wasn't so twisted or overgrown with doubt and fear. And although he was thankful things were clearer in his head now, he still had one niggling regret. He had wasted 30 pounds on a bottle of whiskey for that ungrateful so-and-so upstairs. Oh, well he would just have to file that expense under idiot tax. Not a cheap lesson but one still worth learning. That one called Charlie is an imbecile. What is all this talk of coffee? I simply don't understand it, collector. Randall sat casually on the sofa of his plush hotel room and watched Israel pacing the floor. This time he had made the demon look like a clown complete with green curly wig, white face and red nose. But the most amusing thing about the get-up was that ironically it actually made Israel look genuinely creepy. Israel frowned and put his hands behind his back as he paced looking at the floor. He had appeared just after noon the day before expecting news on McCulloch's location and wasn't best pleased at the lack of movement, so much so that Randall had to remind him that they weren't actually picking up the hotel bill for their stay at Leeds' prestigious Queen's Hotel. How hard can this be? Israel asked, still pacing. This was your idea, collector, remember that. You were the one who insisted on employing humans to locate McCulloch. And all they do is sit around talking about the pros and cons of latte coffee. Sometimes I swear you do this type of thing just to vex me. Relax, Randall told the clown. They're just the babysitters. They have all kinds of people after McCulloch, besides it's only been a couple of days. The one called Bill has just taken a call from one of his associates, and I'm sensing he's got news on Tommy Whitaker. Israel turned to face him. Yep, genuinely creepy. Randall would have to think of some other incarnation or he'd be having nightmares. They've found Whitaker? Israel asked. Feels like it, Randall answered. But why didn't they contact you straight away? It was a good question and one Randall knew the answer to. Guess they're afraid I'll go in all guns blazing. They still think I'm a hitman, remember? The demon let out what was as close as he could get to a laugh, which sounded more like a strangled gagging sound. If only they knew how much you hate guns, he said. Was all Randall said in reply. Although over the last couple of days Randall had grown comfortable around Fraker and Charlie, he knew deep down they didn't trust him, or to be precise, Bill Fraker didn't. Charlie was an open book and he and Randall had connected almost immediately, so much so that he somehow felt there was something of a collector's spirit buried in Charlie's subconscious, and that was something he wanted to explore later if given half a chance. But Bill had remained at a respectful distance, obviously all too aware of the danger he posed to the two of them. Randall knew Fraker would want to check out Whitaker's location first, perhaps even attempt to persuade the lawyer to give up McCulloch to save his own neck. It was a sensible move and one Randall approved of. After all, if it worked, that would be one less thing for Randall to do. Israel jumped forwards and wrung his hands as if strangling an imaginary neck. We should go next door and throttle it out of them, he said. You mean I should, Randall corrected him. You're just the observer, remember that, Israel. Ha! Ishro grunted indignantly and aimed a kick at an expensive-looking lamp on the table which didn't so much as wobble. "Fuck pig," he shouted. And Randall caught an actual edge of emotion in his usually colorless voice which made a refreshing change. "Time is on our side, Ishro," Randall said as the demon spun away from the table in disgust. "Let Fraker do his detective act if he so wishes. Besides, that will give me a chance to speak with Charlie alone. Collector recruitment is not within our remit, Randall. Anyway, the man is an imbecile." He paused, then added, "But having said that, I believe that is the primary requirement for becoming a collector." A ghastly smile cracked his grease-painted face. "Sarcasm now?" Randall mused. "You know, Ishral, you're getting more human every day." The smile fell right off the clown's face. "Now you are just being nasty," he said. "Christ on a bike, Charlie. What are you doing?" Fraker had come into the room looking for his coat to find Charlie with a glass pressed against the wall between theirs and Randall's room. Charlie shushed him with his hand and pressed his ear to the glass. "Randall's talking to himself again," Charlie whispered as if the American could hear him through the wall. "Will you come away?" Fraker scolded. He wondered who he was supposed to be babysitting sometimes. He spotted his coat laid on the back of a chair and grabbed it. Where are you off to?" Charlie asked and finally came away from the wall. "I've just been on the phone to Barney. He's got an address where Whitaker might be hiding out. I'm going to have a look-see." "What now?" "It's nearly midnight," Charlie said, idly tossing the glass from hand to hand. "We've not on office hours, Charlie." Fraker eyed the glass. It was only a matter of time before Charlie dropped it. Hand-eye coordination wasn't his best suit. "Put that down," he said. Charlie put the glass on a table. "I'll get my coat," he said. "No, you stay with the Yank," Fraker said, pulling on his coat. He looked out of the window. At least it had stopped snowing. "I think it's best we keep him away from Whitaker for the moment," he continued. "If Whitaker is at this place, I don't want Randall making a scene. Maybe I can persuade Whitaker to give up McCulloch without any nonsense." "Okay," Charlie said, clearly not happy at being left behind, but Fraker knew he would do as he was told. The truth was, if there was to be a showdown, Fraker didn't want Charlie anywhere near it. He would rather face the wrath of a pissed-off hitman over Charles Walker Sr. anytime. Besides, the kid was becoming too pally with the Yank, just like Fraker feared he would. Whitaker, Whitaker, Whitaker. Fraker had been racking his brains all day trying to think where he knew the man from. He knew he was McCulloch, dodgy lawyer, and that he had done work for Mr. Lynn from time to time, but he just couldn't picture him. "Here, Charlie," Fraker asked. "Where do I know this guy Whitaker from? It's been driving me mad." "You remember him," Charlie said. "Flash Git, always drives around in a Porsche." "Narrow it down a bit, mate." "He's the lawyer who got Rob Murdoch off that murder charge a couple of years back. The boss used him a couple of times." Fraker still couldn't place him. He shook his head. "Oh, come on," Charlie said. "You remember, always dressed to the nines. Late 20s. Perfect hair." An image flashed into Fraker's head and he instantly remembered the lawyer. Tommy Whitaker, he of the perfect hair.